For a long time, sweeteners were promoted as the perfect alternative to sugar. Sweet taste, no calories, and hence no guilt. But that image is starting to crack. A new scientific study published in 2026, so in this year, adds to the growing debate. What exactly was studied and what it means for our everyday habits, we'll cover right after a short intro. Stay tuned for more. My name is Dr. Fabian Mutach. I hold a PhD in biochemistry. I'm a German scientist and founder of Solventrix, a company dedicated to close the knowledge gap between science and your daily nutrition. And it's actually a bit paradoxical. Sweeteners are becoming more popular than ever. They started as a niche product for people with diabetes. Today, more than half of Germans consume foods containing at least one sweetener every day, and 3 out of 4 people use sweeteners at least once a week. At the same time, however, obesity rates have not declined. In fact, they have continued to rise. So the implicit promise, sweeteners help reduce calorie intake, improve health, and support weight loss, doesn't seem to have fully worked out, or doesn't seem to have worked out at all. Now, it would be completely unfair to blame the obesity epidemic in Germany, or actually across the entire Western world, on sweeteners alone. That's not what I'm trying to do here. Instead, let's look at what sweeteners actually do inside the human body, or more precisely, what our body does with the sweeteners. The simple answer is not much. Sweeteners are artificial chemical compounds that taste extremely sweet. But unlike sugar, they are not metabolized for energy and therefore provide no calories. Most of them pass through the body unchanged and are simply excreted. For people with diabetes, or anyone also trying to lose weight, this once sounded like the perfect solution. The Sweetener Association also points out on its website that sweeteners are amongst the most thoroughly studied food additives, classified as safe and legally approved within their regulatory limits. And yes, that is somehow true, but it also overlooks a very important point. Because sweeteners are mostly excreted unchanged, researchers long assumed that they couldn't have much impact. However, we now see increasing evidence that sweeteners can have an impact. In fact, they altered the composition of our gut microbiome, not only in animal studies, but recently also shown in humans. Our gut microbiome consists of many different bacterial species, all living in a delicate balance. And that balance can shift when we consume sweeteners, sometimes just within a few weeks. At first glance, this sounds subtle, but the consequences may be more significant than expected. A group of Israeli researchers showed that the sweeteners sucralose and saccharin, in particular, interact strongly with the gut microbiome and may impair glucose metabolism. Participants in that study showed higher blood sugar spikes and reduced insulin effectiveness. And that is essentially the opposite of what sweeteners are supposed to achieve. And that brings us now to the new study from 2026, which I personally find very interesting. Researchers gave mice either plain water, water containing stevia, or water containing sucralose. So 2 sweeteners were tested in that studies. And importantly, the doses were realistic, comparable to what humans might actually consume, like not extreme like in other experimental studies. The researchers then followed the mice across 2 additional generations. So importantly, the offspring then received only plain water, no sweeteners at all. Only the parents received the sweeteners. In the mice exposed to sweeteners, researchers observed lower levels of short-chain fatty acids, which are generally very beneficial for our health, and they also observed increased inflammatory markers. The effects that I just described were stronger in mice receiving sucralose and weaker in mice receiving stevia. And so far, what I've told you aligns perfectly well with previous findings. Sweeteners can change the gut microbiome in mice and also in humans. But here's now the surprising part. The following 2 generations, even though they never consumed sweeteners themselves, still showed altered ability to produce short-chain fatty acids, and they also showed an increased expression of genes linked to inflammation. These effects were even stronger in the first offspring generation and weakened then in the next generation, which sounds logical. With stevia, the effects disappeared entirely by the later generation. Another important takeaway is not all sweeteners behave the same. Negative effects were more pronounced with sucralose than with stevia. So in that respect, stevia appears to be better. Now, also to be very clear here, the mice did not suddenly develop diabetes from consuming sweeteners. And this is often used as an argument that sweeteners are completely safe, an argument that many people accept. But honestly, I think it deserves a more nuanced view. What we observe instead are subtle shifts in the gut microbiome. Over the long term, over years and years, maybe even decades, especially combined with other lifestyle factors, these changes could potentially contribute to diseases and promote diseases. As I always say, one single study, especially in an animal model, should never be taken as an absolute proof. And of course, that also remains true here. But this new study adds another piece of evidence, suggesting that sweeteners may not be as harmless as we once believed. So what does that now mean for us in practical terms? Personally, I would no longer view sweeteners as a carefree alternative to sugar. I think it has never been. The latest findings reinforce that message. And as uncomfortable as it may sound, the only truly reliable strategy for health is then to really reduce overall sweetness. Whether it comes from sugar or whether it comes from artificial sweeteners doesn't really matter. Okay, what actually helps now? Cut back on sweet drinks. I think that's the most important point. If you want flavor in your drink, try tea or add mint leaves or lemon slices or orange slices to your water. When cravings hit, reach for nuts or vegetable sticks instead. And if you enjoy sweets, reduce them gradually over time. This is a process and it takes time. The evidence, however, increasingly shows that sweeteners are not the simple solution they were once thought to be. And that brings us already to the end of this short video. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like and also a comment, and I hope to see you again in the next video. See you then, yours, Dr. Fabian Mutach.